All right. Good afternoon to everyone. For those who are watching us right now, I'm with Dr. Richi Nayak. She's the Associate Professor at Queensland University of Technology. Her specialization lies in artificial intelligence, data mining, and knowledge discovery in databases, machine learning, applications of data mining, and web intelligence, and social network mining. That is a very very quite a career and quite a specialization and subject there. Welcome, Dr. Nayak. We are so thrilled to have you.
Thanks, Ritu. Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
Tell us, to start straight off, we would love to know what set you it's sort of on the path of data science early in your career. What was the motivation?
So, from the very young age, I was always fond of mathematics. With over any other subject, I would always prefer to study maths. So, I always had this inclination towards maths and engineering.
Mhm.
And it happens in India, you get the career either in engineering or in medical, at least at my time when I was growing up. So, I chose to become an engineer. And during engineering, um, I was always curious to know how these algorithm would work, how those um, predicate calculus equations would work. So with this curious mind, I always wanted to solve those algorithms in much faster way, in much automated way. Um, and that's where brought me into my master's in engineering journey, where I worked on to an electrical engineering problem, but with the use of a machine learning algorithm. So I guess that was my first experience with data science or data mining. Then I switched my career from electrical engineering to computer science and decided to do PhD in computer science. And that's where my hardcore machine learning journey started at QUT itself, about 20 years back now. And then I became an academic and researcher in this particular field.
So let me take you just a little bit back. So you've done all of this. You're from IIT Roorkee, if I'm not wrong.
Yep, I've done my master's post-graduation study there.
And then at what point in your career you went to QUT?
So actually, my journey is like a textbook journey. 12, then bachelor's in engineering, then master's in engineering, and PhD straight away. And as it happens with many women, I actually followed my husband's footpath. So we met in Roorkee and we got married, and then he also decided to do PhD in UQ, that is another university in Brisbane. So I guess I tagged along with him, and I was lucky enough to get the PhD scholarship from QUT
There.
and study at computer science PhD.
And I find it very interesting and very fascinating when you said that in those times it is either doctor or engineer, and these are the only two careers you would consider, like any, and parents pushed you towards, of course, either of the two.
Exactly.
Did you face any sort of stereotypical resistance to you going to engineering and not to more a profession that all women, most women in India who are pushed towards, this is not suited for you, this is suited for you? Were there any such
Really,
questions?
yeah, not true. I'm youngest at home, and I guess I come from a very progressive family. So I never really felt that engineering is not for the girls' domain. But yes, I could see like my brother and my father, and myself, we were pretty sure. Even I had the little inclination that I might do mechanical engineering, but no, I think that's where my limit was, like, okay, stay with electrical engineering at that time, or computer science, where these are the domains quite safe for women. And mechanical engineering or the civil engineering was seen more as adventurous for women's as a career. But then I kind of got used to of it. Like I remember we were only 4 girls over 120 boys in bachelor's, and in and in post graduation I guess I was 2 out of 25 boys. So that became a norm for me to have very few women around.
But
Yeah.
did that so when you did that change your world view in any way when later on you obviously moved up in your career? Have you seen this landscape of gender representation change at the workplace, from the roots where women are coming into STEM and then moving on to a career of their own? Have the landscape changed any at all?
I would love to say yes, but unfortunately not.
No. Yeah.
I guess we became quite progressive 15 or 20 years back, but
Mm-hmm.
it's that at least like now I'm following Australian numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Australia, we have become a bit more regressive. Like we were in a good recovery term 15 or 10 years back, but now at least in IT and engineering, we are back to the old days. Like in Australia, IT is very underrepresented. We
Mm-hmm.
get 20% female graduated. Um, and in one of our first year subject, we only get 13% female enrollments.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, is still the same. Somehow, girls do not resonate with maths, IT, engineering. They are more into creative industry, social
Why
science.
do you think that is? Is it something that they're not naturally inclined to, or is it something that conditioning since childhood? Everybody around them telling them this is
Yeah,
not for you. This is
exactly.
not a
I
subject.
guess,
Let your
yes,
brother take this up. You take something creative.
exactly. And I think from the very childhood, like as a parent, we are building that stigma because we always buy a Barbie doll for a daughter, and for
Well,
son, there would be car or motorbike as a toys. We would hardly ever give dolls to boys or girls to motorbike and things. So I think from the very young age, we are building this conceptual framework that you fit in. That's where you fit in. And when they go to school, I remember like my daughter being in grade 4. Once she came and she said, I'll ask one of my friend and he's very good in math. And I said to her, look, both me and my husband, we are in IT field, and that sound nice to hear from you. But I guess that's how they school as well, that boys would do very quickly this thing, and as a girl we might not do that so well.
and this with a mathematician at home.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what I always say is my response to that was, I put both my daughters from the grade 7, that is a high school in Australia, to girls only school. Now you have no excuse to say you can't fight. So
True.
actually my elder daughter, she is studying IT now.
Right. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned daughters. I was hesitating to ask you like questions about your family, but since you mentioned your daughter, you have two daughters.
2 daughters, yeah.
Right. So coming back to, for those who've just joined us, Dr. Nayak has developed this algorithm which is called long short term memory with transfer learning. It basically sifts through hundreds of tweets, thousands, hundreds and thousands of tweets to sift the misogynistic content in the language, and basically helps the process of cleaning up of the internet spaces for people better, especially for people who are vulnerable to attacks online and abuse online, minority groups, women. So, coming back to this area of expertise, I'm very curious to know what was the trigger for this particular topic. Because, as you know, we are all constantly online. As women, we have to navigate online for not just like pleasure, not just to surf
Yeah.
and browse for our own pleasure, but also for work. There is no way we can say that, hey, this is this unsafe space, so I'm not going to go on Twitter, because I will need to post my official stuff on Twitter. I will need to, much as I want to avoid, but that's a space all of us have to go to, right? So
Exactly.
was having a daughter, having a daughter play any role in this? Have you noticed any incident that upset you, that this should not have been? uh, did that play a role in your subject
I
topic?
would I would say that this research was not really motivated by any personal incident or any experience as such.
Right.
So, but it was more of a conversation that happened between the colleagues. So, for example, like I'm a computer scientist and expert in machine learning,
Mm-hmm.
and I develop a number of algorithms from text mining that can deal with the text and the different problems that arises with the text. So we were in conversation with colleagues from faculty of law. Those they study more in terms of domestic abuse, and that's where we kind of like, as a brainstorming session, I said how technology really can help here. And that's where they were saying that women are really targeted, and those are at risk or vulnerable. They take it very differently as the normal being would take it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this idea developed, that could we do this process automatically, and more to that, would it help a big media companies like Twitter or Facebook to think about it, because they do have very big resources. They can develop algorithms, they can implement their own end.
Yeah.
But when they see it from the outsiders, would it inspire them to do some at their own? Because these organizations, they are so much safe by their own laws,
Mm-hmm.
that they are not really obliged or any uh, kind of like liable for anything that happens
Mm-hmm.
because of social media, because this is the content that we are generating and we are finding responsible for that. So I guess it was more of the research nature, that how technology can meet the social science and bring the benefit to the society.
Right, right. Very interesting that you say that, because, as you know, like both Twitter, Facebook, all social platforms basically where we have footprints. This is not an old topic. This is not a novel topic either, in the sense that for a decade now, women who've been on these platforms, some have left also, like permanently, because of the what we loosely call trolling, but which is actually sexual harassment, relentless sexual harassment of women who have opinions, women leaders, political leaders, all sorts of, women in positions of power, women who are not in positions of power, sometimes just for things they say, just for their opinion. So this has been a consistent problem, and this has not been resolved. Would it be very far fetched to say that this a lot of platforms like Twitter and Facebook are sort of, overrun with trolls, and there's this overwhelming the traffic that comes from trolls and these handles, like that forms the bulk sort of the opinion, this abusive opinion space that is out there. And yet there is very little, it continues, so obviously there's been very little, sort of things done with actual intent, I feel. So if you could just tell us a little bit about this program and how that works in sort of bridging this. What is it different from, say, Twitter's algorithm, and how is it different, and what does it do to bridge that gap? Like, I know for a fact, which you said, that the onus is always on reporting, on women to report. How does it change that?
So the algorithm that we have developed, I guess its high point is because it was a collaborative research. So we were um, working with social scientists who can and who have understood this problem, not technically, but why it happens, what it targets. So as in machine learning, we always say that outcome is as good as the data is.
Mm-hmm.
the key point of machine learning algorithm is the use of that data, and of course, then the algorithmic development. So we were lucky to have this research team where we developed this data set where and it was a very daunting job to go through the tweet and then identifying which one is misogynistic and which one is not. It can put a lot of pressure to read such
Yeah.
derogating comments and those unlawful activities. But anyway, as a part of this research, that's what we did. We had a research assistant who would go through the tweet now. And I would say we are still living in a good world. It was not like every next tweet was misogynistic. We still
Mhm.
had through thousands and thousands of tweets to find one misogynistic tweet. So that was a big one hurdle that we
Oh,
had.
really? Really? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And once we had the label data, now the task was that how do we make the machine to learn context?
Yes,
Because having just the words does not mean it is misogynistic.
true.
Especially in Australian Twitter sphere, we find that people were using it in a more satirical way or in a fun way. It was almost like if you are a close knit circle, then you are using those abusive
Mhm.
words. But those abusive word does not mean that this is a misogynistic. So what it meant that we had to learn this context and the patterns that this kind of context appears in. And that's where we developed this progressive transfer learning approach. So where we, in fact, gradually made the machines to understand. First, we taught the machine to learn the general language. And that's where we use Wikipedia kind of data. So they can learn that that's how the language is expressed. Once they learn the language, we taught the machine to learn bit more aggressive language, like via the reviews, product reviews, where people could be very angry, in general can use very nice words, but at the same time can use very derogatory words.
Mhm.
Once machine learned that, then we made it learn the Twitter language, because Twitter language is very different from our everyday language. So that's gradually learning that it's made. It is started to learn the patterns. And then we introduced the misogynistic tweets. And then it started to understand that even with the presence of word, this tweet is not misogynistic, but this is a misogynistic
Mhm.
tweet. And we use this deep learning algorithm called LSTM with transfer learning. So this combined approach worked, and we
Mhm.
got into the case that it could work together. Um, and the good thing of our approach is that usually when people do research in Google or Open AI Lab, they build very large networks. They have got resources. They have got resources in terms of people, in terms of data, in terms of machines. But
Mhm.
those models become very hard to implement. So
Mhm.
our model is quite simple. It does not have way too many parameters to implement. So
Mhm.
it can be implemented easily as well.
Right, that's fascinating. I'm especially very, very curious to know that when you said that, you had to teach it the context. So, for example, even how young people talk, like if somebody says that this is sick, and it took me a while to understand that it does not sick in the sense they're meaning it for, I sound like a boomer right now, but I'm going to roll with that. But it means actually great, something which is great.
Exactly.
So the
Yeah.
context makes a lot of difference actually. So could you share some examples that you thought were great examples of how nuance plays out in this conversation?
Yes. So, for example, like one thing that I really got amazed with, like go to kitchen. It's such a general phrase, but when it is put in the context, it's such a typical misogynistic tweet. And the algorithm picked some of those examples. So that was great to know that none of the abusive words were there, but
Yeah,
it is
and
still
yet it's
text.
such a sexist word. Go back to the
Yeah.
kitchen.
Yeah,
or
because
making a sandwich.
exactly, because there is no tone, there is no emotion. It's plain text
Right.
occurrence, and
And
based
the
on
algorithm picked that
yeah,
as misogynistic example. Oh, that's
it did
fantastic.
pick it as yeah, yeah.
That's
Of course, it
fantastic.
has its own misses. Yeah, but that was one that we were all surprised that algorithm could do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Lot of
So,
time, there were some examples even as we would not sure what would happen the response to that, whether it's a misogynistic or not.
what? Like, for example?
uh, there were some examples like, and that's where it happens because it becomes hard to find out whether it is considered in a friendly manner or is it in aggressive manner. So there were some words uh,
Like, I
like
read somewhere you said, I hate you.
yeah, or come on bitch, you can't do that. So that kind of thing, that was just the normal way. Yeah.
So context setting. I also so this is very, very, very fascinating, which brings me to my next question, that any machine learning without human intervention, the human interventions that sort of humanize um, intersocial, and interpersonal interactions, is it possible to fully automate and fully sort of make the process go through the AI, machine learning, without countering or factoring in that human intervention? That can it fully be done, basically?
I guess it can be done. So, like, if I take the example of our algorithm, I would say in current state of the form, no. But what happens when we develop this kind of algorithm, and I have done this in previous of some of my research, that we would say that this would go now under trial.
Mhm.
um, when it is under trial, it means this algorithm is working as a backend. It is flagging which one is misogynistic or not. And for that trial period, there would be some human involved checking its accuracy.
Mhm.
It is placed in a system like Twitter, then it is, or any other social media monitoring company, it's getting a lot of traffic. So, and as it also happens in machine learning, we say lifelong learning. As
Mhm.
they learn, they also, as they are in use, they also learn because the more examples are given.
Right.
And actually, the work that is published, we have now another research that has been submitted after this, where actually we are now doing this active learning. So while some examples are presented to the system, and if the system has never been exposed to it, it learns, and then human can correct it, whether it's true or not, and then it learns from its own mistakes or its more reward. So
But
reward,
doesn't that also bring in bias?
yep. So that's another thing, and that's where diversity matters.
Yes,
So
I was
we need
coming to that.
to
Yeah.
ensure that it is getting all kind of exposure. So I would say during the trial, it should be exposed as much as instances it can be, and then making it to learn more of it. And I would say eventually it becomes all automatic system. So I have got a couple of systems not related to abuse detection or anything, but depending upon text mining, and then they become completely automated.
Right. Um, I was seeing that a Pew research said that 70% of those abused online are young people between the age group of 18 to 24, and they're more likely to be harassed, and especially women, people of color, queer communities, caste-based communities. So the reason why the harassment occurs, one of the biggest reason is that it goes underreported. So in the process of mining a million tweet, was there any trend that you saw? Was there more like the content was more towards like a certain group or a certain age group or certain color, people of color or any sort of, were
Um,
there trends, were there like very specific pointers?
Honestly, like being a machine learning research and text mining research, we did not get engaged into those statistics. But as you say, um, would have been interested to see.
But
Um,
isn't data this sort of?
we had access to this metadata that came with the Twitter, but we were more focusing on the tweet content.
Mhm.
And yes, and it was not really the yeah, as you say, I think it would have been very interesting to understand those
Because it's a
trends.
massive data to understand how sexual harassment happens. Like we know it happens, and your
Yeah.
algorithm sort of sets the path of a prevention. But it would give great insights to sort of who are targeted specifically. So I was very curious
Exactly.
about that. That
Yeah.
is there anybody who's
Yeah.
mining this data, anybody who's like analyzing this data?
Yeah. I guess I'll pass on this thought to the social scientist team counterpart
Fantastic.
we had, and they may be, they might already have some
Yeah,
insights to that
sure.
and
Sure.
like that.
So
Yeah.
the other thing is, you mined like 1 million tweets, right? And you chose um, 3 or 4 keywords. You were looking for the
Yep.
words whore, slut, rape. These are words that are not very frequent in the Indian context. Say, for example, in the like the abusive
Yeah.
language that is used on South Asian Twitter, for example. It's very, very, the language of abuse is again very local and colloquial, right?
Yeah.
My question is, can the algorithm be tweaked or developed to identify country specific misogynistic content?
Yep, it can. Actually, we have developed a very similar system for Indian language, Hindi, and it
Acha.
did that. Yeah. So the accuracy was quite high for that. Of course, we, as I said in the beginning, that we need to teach algorithm what we want to learn. So
Okay.
in that one, the data set that we use for training was a bit different. Was because the another challenge that we get, and in this particular work we completely got rid of that, is people use their own slangs. So like for example, if I'm writing English tweet, but I might write slang in Hindi, and that's actually an abusive word. So in this research, we completely cleaned it and we did not consider. But as you said, like if it's a South Asian language, then we need to consider those slangs and those words. So I guess that needs to be done, some pre-analysis of tweet, and then seeing what are the word occurrences happening and which are the most frequent words that are used in this misogynistic context or racial context,
Right,
harassment context, bullying context.
right.
And there is so much incidence of the abuse, and actually we are right now in our group, we are trying to understanding COVID-19 and what kind of abuse did happen, because people became very vulnerable during this time and the tolerance was very low at social media.
Mhm.
So that's what we are trying to understand. So now the data set that we would use would be completely different what we had in this particular project.
Do you feel this has tremendous potential to also work in the space of mental health? Because a lot of this abuse, a lot of this gendered, very gendered violence that communities, suffer online, it spills into their personal lives, especially if you're from the queer community, if you're a Dalit, and this sort of spills over into mental health as well. So how do you sort of plan to work? Is there mental health organizations that can sort of use this as well, or how does this key in?
Yep, I guess we are. So that was one of our intention when we were going for this research, that we should be able to be supported by some institute. Like in Australia, there is a Black Dog Institute that is quite considered for the mental health institute. And if we are supported by such of those institute, then we can actually build this application surrounding that. So it actually works as an alert system, and trying to identify the patterns there, and without it is upscaling, can you detect it beforehand, so you can understand the pattern that when things go out of the hand, and when people or women are at risk because of this harassment. Like, everyone has got their own tolerance level, and everyone treats it very differently. So I guess that is one very potential uses of research. And as a researcher, usually our research is driven by the organization who fund our research. So I would be very interested to work with any such organizations and see how this research can be adopted into, let's say, in some kind of app where it gets the trigger.
Right, that's fantastic. Also, especially in the Indian context, we navigate Twitter here in India a lot, and what we see most, and there are lots of complaints of it. What is what race and color and all this, like, very targeted harassment in India? There's a lot of casteist tweets. There are a lot of casteist tweets that basically just slip through Twitter's algorithm because they are made either in the regional languages, and as far as I know, Twitter doesn't have any reporting mechanism of reporting casteist tweets. You can report abuse, harassment, targeted harassment, but is this your algorithm? This can be one of the ways to sort of modify its use for Indian Twitter.
Yep, I guess so. Because now we have tried the similar algorithm in very different contexts, like in Hindi language, and now racial abuse
Right,
detection during COVID. Um, so I'm pretty sure that it can be easily adoptable to that.
right. And also coming back to data, so basically, can we agree that in many cases, lack of data actually prevents organizations from taking comprehensive steps against violence, like for violence against women? Data is key to identifying the areas of gap, why certain people are falling behind the curve, why certain people are targeted. So what are the ways, I would like to know, because this is your life's experience, what are the ways data driven tech can help in this journey, can help curb violence against women, can help gender based violence activists work this space?
Yep, and I guess that's where, so one of the better point in our algorithm was that it has this domain adaptation. So even though we didn't had the lack of label data,
Mm-hmm.
but could take advantage of other domain data that was available. And that's where I guess the algorithmic progress is moving towards, where we are developing algorithm that can work on less data, and how to utilize the data that is available around. So for example, the problem is getting the label data where someone has reported, and a lot of time now when we go back to tweet, because it was reported, the tweet is not there, so we
Right.
cannot use the text of it because Twitter has removed it. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we really make that out of it? So what we have realized that, but there is a plenty of data available. So
Mm-hmm.
there are certain techniques where we can work with unlabeled data. So in technical term, we call them as unsupervised learning techniques. So
Right.
that's we are working on. So we trying to take advantage of this unsupervised learning, where we can actually, um, based on the topical patterns or thematic patterns, or maybe some structural patterns, without having the label, we can identify that. So the resources would require only once we identify, someone can verify that pattern being misogynistic or not. So it reduces some effort. Of course, some human effort is needed, but then it drastically reduces the effort needed. So I guess from the research point of it, I would say that we are working towards the technique where lack of label data would not stop us working on such important and significant problems and issues.
Fantastic. What is the next frontier to climb in machine learning?
So we are working on algorithmic parts as well, where we can make the algorithm strong, algorithm quick. So these are typical technical problem in terms of scalability. If it works on the small data, it should work on the large data. Robustness, if it works on a good quality data, it should also work on a very error prone or noisy data. But and and I guess the one thing that we touched upon was bias and diversity. So that's a one thing machine learning people should be aware of. And that's why diversity in the development makes a lot of difference. There are not many women data scientists
Yes.
or machine
Yes.
learning, especially at the level of like Google or Facebook, where they are driving the research onto that.
That was my next question. How
Exactly.
representation matters in AI, in how it
Yeah,
drives it.
exactly. Like we know some of the common stories. For example, in LinkedIn, high profile jobs are not offered to many times to women because of the bias in there that high profile people in LinkedIn are men. So many female never really get the
Is this
job.
public knowledge?
Yeah, there has been some research in there and some comments made there. So, and LinkedIn being such a popular medium now, but because of just the data, this bias happens there. Like Facebook, we all know that it made so much mistakes in some of the Black people faces. It would not recognize. And I think, and there was this
In
story.
Twitter too. In Twitter too. Like the
Yeah,
it's there was a series of thread where you post like a white face and a
yeah,
African American, and how the algorithm sort of.
yeah. They would always connect the terrorism with the black faces. Or a very recent example of Zoom, that in the Zoom meeting when they were happening, Zoom would cut off a black person's face and would put a
The
poll or
background, right? I saw that too.
background. So those kind of bias exist in the algorithm. And I guess when there is a diverse team that is aware of those issues, then that would be good to develop this algorithm. So I guess it is the same concept as it applies in leadership, that the diversity comes in, then you think. And in COVID-19, like there is now the known research that organizations, they were led by women. Like New Zealand is a very good
Right.
example. They really
Did
performed.
better. Did better in handling the COVID crisis.
Exactly. So as a women, we bring some compassion, some those kind of issues. And I guess that would help in the algorithms as well. When we check, we are intentionally paying attention to those test cases. Those test cases may
Right.
have been ignored otherwise.
Right. This has been really illuminating. Thank you so much. I loved every minute of this. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Nayak. More power to you, more power to you to build more algorithms that make
And
spaces safer for us and for future generations. Thank you for your time. Thanks a lot.
exactly. And more power to women, I guess.
Truly. Thank,
Yeah.
thank
No,
you.
it
It's
was
been
nice
lovely.
talking to you, Ritu.
It was
Bye
lovely.
bye.
Bye.